If you were fixing your bra straps, fussing with wires, or battling your bra during this podcast, stop right now. You'll want to hear this. Those bra problems, those problems you thought you had to live with, Third Love has solved them. Their bras make it easy to get what you want, whether it's ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or stopping your shirt buttons from pulling. With over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, you'll never be stuck between two sizes that don't fit. So stop settling for bad bras. Now's the time to treat yourself and get your problem solved. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're a returning listener, I want to say a big thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. So without further ado, let's get started on today's story. Today's case is taking us out of Ireland and across the Atlantic Ocean to America. More specifically, to the Pacific Crest Trail. The Pacific Crest Trail is basically a walk from Mexico to Canada through some of the wildest countryside in America. It stretches 2,650 miles from the Mexican-US border to Canada and has some of the most breathtaking scenery. But as you know, these beautiful places come with their fair share of extreme danger as well. The trail cuts through 3 states, California, Oregon, and Washington state. It passes through 25 national forests in 7 national parks. It is also known for its extreme differences in climate, from the snow-covered peaks of the Sierra Nevada to the sun-soaked desert in southern California and the green, vibrant leafy forests of the Pacific Northwest. The trail itself is like a pilgrimage of sorts for a lot of people. Work began on it in the 1930s, but it would not officially finish until 1993, when it became recognised as one of the US's 11 national scenic trails. It was hoped it would rival the Appalachian Trail, which is on the east coast of America. Every year, thousands of people attempt this through hike. Basically, that's walking the trail from start to finish, all 2,650 miles of it. Now, that's not an easy task. It's untamed and it's fierce. Hikers will encounter everything from wild animals to exposure to extreme elements, dehydration, disorientation, unsafe terrain, dangerous river crossings, isolation and open cliff edges, to name but a few. This trail is not a walk in the park. And it is on this trail in April 2017 that we find a young 25-year-old man named David O'Sullivan. Now, David, who was born on the 29th of August 1991 in Cork, Ireland, loved to hike, and completing the Pacific Crest Trail would have been a major achievement for David. Now, I'll give you a little background on David before we get into what happened to him. As I said, he was born on the 29th of August 1991 in Cork. David had one older brother who was 4 years his senior, and had grown up in a very loving family, which included his brother and his parents, Con and Carmel, who adored both of their boys. Despite having such a small nuclear family, David had a large, wider family. His grandparents, his aunts, his uncles and his cousins all played an active role in his life. David was described as kind, loyal and thoughtful. As a young boy, he attended Saline National School, which was a small school with about 90 pupils, and it was said he made friends for life there. He excelled at school, particularly enjoying amateur drama, and he was known for his comedic timing. After national school, David would go on to be educated by the Christian Brothers for secondary school. He was particularly good at English and geography. He would do stand-up comedy each year for the Christmas parties and would perform at various charity events. While at school, he also did a sponsored head shave for Marymount, which is a local hospice in the Cork area. With an avid interest in media, David went on to do a 1-year course in media studies before hitting to University College Cork to do an honours degree in English and philosophy. While attending university, he did a weekly radio programme, and had hopes of pursuing this line of work after gaining more life experience and travelling the world. David also loved reading, with hundreds of books lined up in his bedroom. Other interests David had included cycling, running, films, board games, and politics. When he was younger, he also enjoyed horse riding and had obtained a black belt in karate by the age of 16. On his love of hiking, his mother said, quote, "David liked to hike, and he and his friends often went off on day trips to our local mountains hiking." When David was in college, he got a weekend job at a local garage and would stay on full-time after finishing college to save money for travelling and to buy a car. He'd previously gone on lots of family holidays to England, Spain, Portugal, Tunisia and the Canary Islands, as well as New York. He was, you could say, very well travelled. When he was older, he went with his dad on a sightseeing tour to Scotland, taking in the Scottish Highlands, London, and he went to Washington as well with him. He travelled to South Korea with his brother, and he also went to Thailand to visit one of his cousins. This trip to Thailand was just before his trip to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. He had read the book by Cheryl Strayed, a memoir about her journey on the Pacific Crest Trail called Wild. It was a story of grief and healing on the Pacific Crest Trail, and the book stuck with him, and David wanted to attempt it himself in 2017. What originally started out as a dream became a reality when he decided in 2016 he was definitely going to do it the following year. He obviously prepped before leaving. In the months leading up to his departure, he would train on local trails, build up his equipment, and save as much money as he could for the trip that was fast approaching. Though the local trails were nothing like what he would face on the Pacific Crest Trail from a terrain, climate, and of course a wild animal point of view, he did his best to be prepared. He was looking forward to it with enthusiasm. Though his parents were nervous about his upcoming trip, they also knew that David would have done everything to be well prepared for what was ahead. Despite having reservations, they would never stop him from pursuing his dreams. And with that, in March of 2017, after all his extensive preparations, David took a flight to the United States to begin his adventure of hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. Guys, telling stories like this takes a lot of care and honestly a lot of mental focus. That's why I agreed to try something called Magic Mind. They reached out to me and sent me a 2-week supply of their free, original and max formulas to test. But I made it clear to them I'll only ever share something here that I genuinely tried and really believe is worth recommending. Now, they ended up sponsoring the show, and let me tell you why. I've always reached for the coffee when researching and editing, but I was getting wicked jitters and the crashes were just not helping me. I used to think coffee was giving me energy, but it turns out it's not. It actually just blocks the receptors in your brain that tell you you're tired. So when that wears off, you have a big crash. That's why I was always reaching for another cup of coffee mid-morning. Now, what's different about Magic Mind is their time-released caffeine. Instead of hitting you all at once like coffee, it releases gradually over a few hours. That means no spikes, no crashes, just steady, calm energy. It's also packed with nootropics, adaptogens like ashwagandha and Rhodiola rosea, and vitamins to support focus and reduce stress. Now here's how it worked for me. The free one had 0 caffeine, was great for when I was up late at night working. The original, it gave me clear, steady focus for writing, and the max was definitely my go-to when I was having a long prep day, when I really needed to stay sharp for the whole day. I have to say my favourite was the original. It helped clear that mental fog without me feeling wired. I'll give you an example. One morning I was trying to finalise an episode outline after a really bad night's sleep. My brain was just not cooperating. So I went and I took the original Magic Mind shot, and within a short while, I can tell you I was mentally ready. I was more focused and less scattered. I think it was the slow release caffeine and that full dose of vitamin B, C and D that really did the trick. Now, a friend of mine, she's tried the free one. She's caffeine sensitive and says it helps her feel focused and calm. You can also take a quick quiz on the Magic Mind website to find your match, and they ship worldwide, which is fantastic. They've just launched, and to kick things off, they're offering an incredible 60% off your first subscription. So just go to magicmind.com/IrelandC60 and use the code IrelandC60 at checkout. It's their biggest discount yet, and it won't be around, I can tell you, forever. So if you've got a lot to get done, this is genuinely worth a try. And wait till I tell you the best part. There's a 100% money back guarantee. If it's not for you, they'll refund you in full, no questions asked. So you're basically trying it for free, and you can cancel at any time. Thanks again, Magic Mind, for sponsoring this episode. For the first few weeks, everything appeared to be going according to plan. David was following the trail and sending updates regularly back home. But then, all of a sudden, these regular updates just stopped. David went radio silent. From the depths of the Pacific Crest Trail, David had inexplicably disappeared. The last known correspondence from David was an email he had sent the day before he disappeared on the 6th of April 2017. It was sent from the library in a little town called Idlewild. Idlewild is a small, artsy mountain town nestled in the San Jacinto Mountains. Known for its pine forests, hiking trails and relaxed pace, it draws visitors with its mix of rustic charm, creative energy and stunning natural beauty. To try and understand what happened to David, we need to ask the questions. What unfolded during those critical weeks on the trail? What do we know and still not know about his time on the trail? What signs, if any, were there during these weeks that something wasn't right? How did those days play out, step by step? Were there any clues in his movements or behaviour during this time? To dig a little deeper, we need to look into the timeline of David's trip. What we know for sure is that David was one of 4,000 people granted permits to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Described as one of the most iconic hiking routes in the world, the Pacific Crest Trail is a test of endurance, solitude and self-reliance. And for many, as I said, it's more than just a walk. It's a pilgrimage, a reset, a reckoning. But out there, days from the nearest town or phone signal, when something goes wrong, it can take weeks to be noticed. David had been preparing financially, mentally and physically for this challenge. Now, what a lot of people don't know about the Pacific Crest Trail, and I've only learned this through my research, is that even though the permits are issued through the Pacific Crest Trail Association, which is a non-profit that helps maintain and protect the trail, they don't actually track the hikers through GPS or mandatory check-ins. Once you start the trail, you're basically on your own. The Pacific Crest Trail Association will give you the permit and a recommended start date. From then on, all your actions going forward on the trail are up to you. That freedom to walk alone, off-grid, for weeks at a time is both the beauty and the pearl of the trail. It offers unmatched solitude and self-discovery, but also means that when something goes wrong, it can go unnoticed for far too long. The date David was given as his designated start date was the 22nd of March 2017. From what I've read and heard, this is quite an early start date, with most through hikers, as they're called, that want to do the hike from start to finish. They usually like to start late April to early May. I'm talking now about the northbound hikers here. The reason being, they like to wait for the snow to start melting and the heat in the desert to be less intense. David flew into Southern California and made his way to a little town on the Mexican-US border called Campo. Known as Mile Marker Zero, it is the beginning of the Pacific Crest Trail, or PCT Trail. From Campo, the trail heads into the Anza Borrego Desert and off into the mountains beyond. Before he even started out on this leg of the journey, things appeared a little off, judging from an email David sent to his father from Campo. In the email, David told his dad that despite 50 hikers being due to start the trail on the same day as himself, he only saw 2, which was strange. He hiked with these 2 people for a while, but they would eventually split up, and that was the last he saw of them. In the email to his father, David wrote, "I hiked about 6 miles on the first day. I passed 2 tents. There were meant to be 50 people starting that day. The silence was eerie." This phenomenon is known as the bubble. It basically means you have a big group of hikers at the start, and as the height progresses, the group disperses into smaller groups as they get deeper into the trail. So had David missed this bubble, or had the bubble missed David? On the 23rd of March, which would have been the second day of his hike, David headed further into the trail and into the desert. He passed 2 other hikers, one who was only going a certain distance and didn't want to chat, and another who David did chat to about destinations on the trail like Idlewild and other such destinations that David hadn't even heard about at this point. The following day, the 24th of March, was very warm in the desert. David emailed home saying, "I didn't see anyone hiking on the trail. The only people I saw were a couple of hunters, one carrying beer and the other carrying a rifle. Maybe don't tell Mum that part." This email didn't sound as upbeat as previous emails David had sent home to his dad. There was a nervousness to it when you read between the lines. But that night, David did come across another through hiker at a campsite. This girl had completed in 2 days the part of the trail that had taken David 3 days. She looked through David's gear and noticed something critical. David had miscalculated the weight of his bag, having accidentally packed his gear based on kilograms instead of pounds. This oversight may not seem like a big deal, but when you're hiking through deserts and all kinds of extreme weathers, every ounce matters when it comes to the weight of the gear you're carrying. Despite this, David appeared to be in good spirits. He was lavishing the beautiful surroundings that he found himself in. In another email to his dad, he wrote, "There has been a lot of rainfall lately, and all the desert flowers are in bloom. I could smell their perfume like aroma as I hike. Most of the place is covered in green, and there are streams everywhere. It's a weird time to be in Southern California. It's not usually like this." David reached the small town of Mount Laguna on the 25th of March. He was now over 6,000 feet up in the mountains above San Diego County. While here, he stopped at a well-known outfitter's and swapped out a lot of his heavy gear for lighter gear, which was a smart move and may have been orchestrated by the girl he met at the campsite. David was learning as he went how to adapt to his surroundings to maximise his safety and experience on the trail. Over the next 3 days, David made fantastic time hiking over 35 miles. This brought him up to the 28th of March and his arrival in Julian, a quaint little mining town. This little gem of a town is famous amongst the hikers, not just for its hospitality, but for its apple pie, apparently. He spent the following day, the 29th of March, resting. While there, he sent another email to his dad and talked about the local cafe and the apple pie that seemingly weighed over a pound. He told his dad in the email that he hadn't tried it yet, that he was still only eating normal amounts of food. In that email, he spoke about something that seemed to be bothering him: loneliness. He said he hadn't fallen into any particular group yet and was still going solo with the hike. He found it odd that there didn't seem to be that many people around hiking the trail. Then, from the 30th of March to the 2nd of April, David was back hiking the trail and making good time, having covered over 70 miles on this particular stretch. This was the longest stretch to date, and on one of those days, he even managed 20 miles of a distance, passing through Warner Springs and Cleveland National Forest, making his way into the remote Anza Barango Desert State Park. At this stage, the weather was beginning to change for the worst, with another hiker blogging on 31st of March that the wind was so strong it bent the poles of his tent. This violent wind was accompanied by driving rain as well. David had made no reference to this storm in any of the emails he had sent, but no doubt he would have been stuck in the middle of it on his own. On the 3rd of April, David had lunch at Paradise Valley Cafe outside Anza, California. This is a well-known trail stop frequented by a lot of hikers as they meander their way through the PCT. At the cafe, he met a fellow thru hiker named Daniel Windsor. Daniel remembered meeting David at the cafe. He remembered he was friendly and a little sunburnt, with David's Irish accent and smile standing out to Daniel. He said they chatted away about the logistics of the hike and what gear they had. David told Daniel how he'd saved up hard, working in the garage to be able to afford the hike in the first place. Daniel said that after they left the cafe, David was able to get a lift back to the trail, but Daniel had to walk. He joked that he had called David Lucky Dave as he jumped in the car for his lift. By the 4th of April into the 5th, David was in Idlewild. He booked into the Idlewild Inn for 2 nights. He sent an email to his parents saying that the town itself was cheap and friendly, with lots of tasty places to eat. He spent a couple of days resting and stocked up on supplies. Now, even though everything seemed to be going grand for David, there was one glaring problem that David had, whether he realised it or not at the time. He was hiking with no tracking device of any description, no phone, no personal locator beacon, and no GPS. The only way he could communicate was through a Kindle that he had, and this had to be connected to Wi-Fi. He could only do that when it was fully charged, and as you can imagine, there was no Wi-Fi when he was out in the middle of a forest or on the side of a remote mountain. And to make matters worse, the charger was a European charger and would not fit the American plug points. So he had ordered the correct kind of charger, but it hadn't arrived. So he ordered it again. In an email to his parents, he told them that he would be starting later that morning, as he had to wait for the post office to open so he could get the charger. On the 6th of April, David would sign the trial register, which was outside of the Idlewild Inn. Usually, beside their name, they would put in their desired destination. But on this particular day, all David put was his name. He also sent a message to a friend of his that lived in Santa Barbara, saying that he hoped to visit him in about 4 weeks. The plan being to hike another 470 miles to Ridgecrest and take a bus up along the coast. On the 7th of April, David checked out of the inn and started heading north. And with that, 2 weeks of hiking, 180 miles covered, and David is literally never seen again. He would never make that trip to Santa Barbara. His family never received another email from him. His bank account was never touched again. Initially, this did not alarm his parents, as before he left to fly to America to start the hike, he told them there may be periods of time when he'd be off-grid and wouldn't be able to make contact. So they assumed this was just one of those times. They waited patiently for David to get in touch, and before you knew it, 2 weeks was gone, and then a month. When he didn't turn up as planned to his friend's place in Santa Barbara, again, he wasn't panicked. He just wanted to check in to make sure he was okay, so he sent him a text saying, "Hey, when should I expect you to arrive here?" He got no reply, so the following day he just sent a simple hello, but there was still radio silence. It was now nearly 2 months since anyone had heard from David. Back home in Ireland, his family got in touch with the local Gardaí, posting on websites specific to the Pacific Crest Trail, like hikers forums, etc., posting pictures of David and asking if anybody had seen him with details of his last known location. They implored people that if they had seen him to please let the family know. On reaching out to David's bank, they were told that the account was still active, which gave them a glimmer of hope. He was still using his card To them, this meant that he must be okay, that he's just in a place where he couldn't contact him. But it turned out this activity was not David buying stuff with his card. It was just direct debits that were coming out automatically out of his account. The last official transaction that David had actually made was in Idlewild. By the time 3 months had passed and his family were still not hearing anything from him, they again contacted the Gardaí, but this time also went one step further and contacted the Irish consulate in San Francisco. The complexities and difficulties of trying to report somebody missing over international borders was not something the family had anticipated. They hadn't a clue who to call. Who had the jurisdiction? And will they even care that an Irish person is missing somewhere out there in the wilderness? They eventually got in touch with an Irish outreach group in San Diego who started making a few calls. They got in touch with the owner of an Irish pub in a place called Marietta, which is approximately 50 miles from Idlewild. The owner of the pub knew a police officer who just happened to be Irish. He got involved and cut through a lot of the red tape. And on the 13th of July 2017, 3 months since the last time David had been seen, David's information was finally fed into the state and federal missing persons database. He contacted the Riverside Sheriff's Department, which oversees the Idlewild area. At this stage, David, as I said, was missing for more than 3 months. Riverside Sheriff's Department knew they were dealing probably with a search and recovery as opposed to a search and rescue. David's mother said that she had assumed once it became known that her son was missing, search and rescue operations would be commenced. But this didn't happen. Practically no one was looking for David. The urgency that would be assumed after he had been reported missing was that within a few hours, a search would be up and running. But that wasn't the case. He'd been missing for months. A few leads were followed up by investigators and a few sightings had been reported, but none of these led to anywhere. On the 12th of August 2017, the one and only official search for David was carried out, covering a 20-mile radius of the Pacific Crest Trail. The search area stretched from Fuller's Ridge to Desert Edge, just north of Interstate 10. Now, before we go any further, I just want to give you an idea of what this area around Fuller's Ridge is actually like. So you have the unforgiving terrain of the Devil's Slide Trail. Now this trail gets very steep very fast. It's very scenic. You're climbing through rugged granite rocks and dense pine forests, and they offer amazing views of the valley below. It's a challenging hike with sharp switchbacks and rapidly changing weather, making it both breathtaking and treacherous at the same time. Now, just beyond this is a high elevation known for its exposed ridge lines, sharp drop-offs and stunning panoramic views. It's covered in snow in early spring, which makes the usually moderate trail very dangerous. And this would have been around the time David was there. And of course, local folklore talks about a spirit who lures people into the mountains never to be seen again. There are tales of lost gold mines hiding Spanish gold buried deep in the mountains, protected by spirits, and those who search for it are doomed. This is local folklore, but eerily prophetic. Now, nothing was found on that search, and by October, David's case file had been closed with the Riverside Sheriff's Office, saying, "At this time, there are no additional investigative leads. No additional information has been received that would show, in fact, that David was either lost or missing along any portions of the PCT within the department's jurisdiction, or prove that David was even in Idlewild. The case will be closed exceptional until further information is developed." And with that, David's case appeared to be closed. In law enforcement terms, closed exceptional means that law enforcement knows what happened, but something is preventing them from actually solving the case. But that usually stands in criminal cases, and this didn't look like a criminal case. But when they were asked what closed exceptional means in regards to a missing persons case, the The sheriff's office politely declined in answering. The next county over on the trail was San Bernardino County. Officials there had never even searched for David. They said the only information they had was that David was in Idlewild, so the assumption was that he had never made it into their county. A few days after the case had officially closed, David's parents arrived on a flight from Ireland to California. They were there to look for their son. This would be the first of 3 trips they would make in the search for David. Because the case was closed when David's parents arrived, they literally didn't know where to begin. There was no help forthcoming, and as we know, no searches ongoing for David. There was nothing happening. Eventually his parents did get to speak to officials who relayed the grim message that it could basically take years, if ever, to find David. His parents made a second trip that December, but were met with a frosty reception. A single detective agreed to talk to them. He made them feel like a nuisance, basically. And as David's parents said, they felt like all he was doing was encouraging them to leave. It appeared nobody cared that David was actually missing. There was no empathy from any quarter and no sense of urgency to find him. All this detective told them was that if a search and rescue team happened to be out training in the area, they would keep an eye out for him. Not very reassuring and so utterly frustrating. I mean, not only is your son missing and you're in a foreign country, but the people that are supposed to be helping you and guiding you through what must have been the worst time of your life seem to have zero interest. Everything seemed so bleak and so depressing. The family were basically banging their heads off a brick wall. But then, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, out of all this negativity and hopelessness, came a ray of sunshine, a glimmer of hope. And that glimmer of hope came in the form of the Fowler O'Sullivan Foundation, which was created in honour of David and Chris Fowler, another young hiker who had gone missing on the PCT. This foundation was created to fill that void where families are left trying to navigate all the red tape and bureaucracy when a loved one goes missing. A lady called Kathy Tarr is front and centre of the foundation. Kathy had made plans to hike the PCT in 2016, but a serious car accident had forced her to pull out. But she maintained her ties to the hiking community and even volunteered in the search for Chris Fowler, who was 34 years old when he went missing in October of 2016. While volunteering in one of the many searches for Chris, she came across the missing persons poster for David. Of course, now, Kathy had never even met David, but when she read that flyer and the words of grief, basically, and desperation that was written on them, she felt compelled to do something to help these families. She met with Con and Carmel Sullivan in November of 2017 after they had arrived to try and locate David. She could see the frustration and anxiety on their faces as they tried to navigate a foreign legal system and all the confusion that comes with that. I mean, it's hard enough to navigate our own legal system, but to be trying to figure out all the intricacies of a foreign one while you're in a total state of despair must be a whole other level of anxiety. Kathy agreed to help them and became their advocate, basically, their spokesperson, I suppose, in a way. As Kathy worked alongside Chris and David's families, she could see everything that was wrong with the system that was in place. It seemed built to cause more problems for the families than to actually help them seamlessly in their hour of need. She noted the lack of coordinated search support and the emotional toll on the families as they tried to basically do all the work themselves. And this is where the Fowler O'Sullivan Foundation was born from. Its mission was to ensure no family would ever feel as unsupported or as at sea as these two families had in their darkest hour. Its aim was to assist families of missing hikers, to put them in touch with the relevant vetted resources like organised search organisations that will help you after the official search has ended. The foundation also advocates for prevention and safety in outdoor exploration. As David's case grew quieter and literally nothing was being done by authorities to try and find him, the foundation drew on a group of like-minded people who had heard David's story and felt the need to help. to back his parents and to basically try and find David. These people now weren't just ordinary people. They had various skills like mapping coordination and were well versed in navigation, search and rescue. They had lots of experience in topographic maps, GPS overlay, weather records and trail logs. They would study photographs and terrain reports, and based on their findings they theorised that David hadn't made it very far past Idlewild. The general consensus was that he may have taken an alternate route to avoid the snow and avoid getting injured, and in doing so may have got lost in what was described as unforgiving wilderness. This group of people kept investigating and kept searching until what we all know happened in 2020. This, of course, brought all search efforts to a complete standstill due to travel restrictions and everything else that went with those strange times that we all lived through. When search efforts finally recommenced, despite not finding David, the search team did find 2 other hikers that had been missing. So at least that was something for their families. Despite still not having found David, these discoveries showed that the work that the foundation and its volunteers are doing is having a positive impact and bringing closure for those families. The search for David continues, and he is still officially a missing person. 8 years on, David's family still don't have the answers that they so desperately seek. Lack of any evidence even. They haven't even found a thing belonging to David. Not even his backpack or an item of clothing. Nothing along the trails. All this, of course, has led to lots of speculation and theories, but nothing concrete. Some of these theories are baseless and without any foundation. Others, more logical. Those who have really studied this case, as I said, people in the know and with the experience, believe that he never made it out of the San Jacinto Mountains, just north of Idlewild. This part of the trail, as I said, is particularly treacherous. It cuts through steep icy ridges and dense forested areas. This is where those experienced volunteers believe David met some sort of a tragic accident. The area that the searchers have really focused their attention on is that area of Fowler Ridge, which I've already described to you earlier on in the podcast. As I said, this area is always approached with extreme caution, even by the most experienced hikers, and especially at that time of year that David was hiking it, early spring. In April of 2017, Fowler Ridge was still covered in snow. David was not prepared at all for this kind of hike. He was not used to hiking in snow, and especially in an area so dangerous. He just wasn't prepared. He had no crampons or microspikes. He had no ice axe. And as I said before, no GPS beacon, no mobile phone, only that Kindle that wasn't even charged, and a paper map. He had not prepared at all for these wintry conditions. There had been multiple reports that season, even from the most experienced of hikers, that they had had issues along Fuller's Ridge of slipping and getting lost and things like that. Some even requiring rescue because they were injured. So you could see how easily someone with less experience hiking this kind of terrain and in this kind of weather could take a wrong turn or slip and fall or even become disorientated or exhausted because of the altitude and the temperatures. This place is not very forgiving if you make a mistake. Another little aside that could have easily been missed, but is very important. Remember I told you that the morning he was due to leave Idlewild, he had to wait for the post office to open to get his package that contained his new Kindle charger. Well, the fact that he had to wait for the post office to open meant that David was later starting out on the trail. Anybody else that was starting the hike that day would have already been well gone. So if something did happen to David along the trail, there was no one coming after him that could have helped him. They were already well ahead of him. This has made the volunteer searchers even more determined to keep searching for David. But that's not an easy task. The minute you go off the actual trail, you're into really dangerous terrain and sometimes inaccessible terrain. You've got dense tree cover, really steep slopes, really rocky terrain, fast-moving streams, boulders, not to mention, as I said, the wildlife. Drones can't even be used in the search for David because that area where he actually is believed to have gone missing is state wilderness. So federal law does not permit the use of drones in the area. Besides that, drones wouldn't really be ideal, as with the dense canopy of trees covering the area, you could still miss him. Some wonder if David had actually made it out of the San Jacintos and that whatever happened to David happened further down the trail. A part of the trail that hadn't been searched because everybody assumed he was still very close to Idlewild. Because of this, the search would not have gone beyond that county into San Bernardino, as it was a different jurisdiction altogether. Even though it's possible a lot of people believe it's less likely that David travelled that far. But there is one little detail that could cast doubt on the theory that he made it that far. After about 5 days of hiking from Idlewild is the next major stop on the trail, a place called Big Bear. There's no record of David ever making it to Big Bear. He never picked up supplies there for his onward journey. His bank account remained untouched. There's no transactions from Big Bear. And the last time his Kindle connected to Wi-Fi was on the 5th of April. So the fact that he hadn't resupplied for this onward journey is a pretty good indication to all those people in the know. And you don't really have to be in the know, to be honest, to realise that he hadn't made it that far. So David must be somewhere between Idlewild and Big Bear. But where? That's a lot of ground to cover, and as I said, unforgiving ground. Then, of course, comes the darker theories as to what may have happened to David. One being, in some of the remoter areas of the trail, a lot of illegal marijuana is grown. These illegal grows are protected by the kind of people you don't want to bump into when you're on your own in the middle of nowhere. If David did go off trail to avoid the snow and accidentally came across one of these grow sites, let's just say he wouldn't have got a welcoming reception. But again, this is speculation. We just don't know what happened to him. Another theory that has been bandied about was that David made the choice himself to disappear. You hear this one a lot when people disappear. But David's parents and family and everybody that knew him well say that this is not even a remote possibility. David loved his life and had no reason whatsoever to voluntarily disappear. The most likely theory, and the one that all who've searched and continued to search for David believe to be true, is that it was a simple accident in the wilderness and David had no way of getting help. It's very sad for his family to think about that, I'm sure. But it does seem to be the most plausible of all the theories that I've gone through with you. Over the years, with all the elements that come with the wilderness, the climate, the animals, everything really, it would make it so much harder now to find David. David O'Sullivan set off on the Pacific Crest Trail with a backpack, a plan, and a sense of purpose. He was hoping to see more of the world and meet people along the way. But somewhere out there, something went wrong. And to this day, his family still don't have those answers to what that actually was. If you or someone you know was on the trail in 2017, especially around the Idlewild area, please speak up. You can contact Riverside County Sheriff's Department on +1 951 791 3400. This is the Hemet station, which covers the Idlewild area. Or visit the Fowler O'Sullivan Foundation at found.org. Even the smallest detail might help. David deserves to be found and his family deserve to know what happened. So if you do have any information, please don't be shy in coming forward. So guys, that's it for today's episode of the Ireland Crimes and Mysteries podcast. Again, thanks for your listenership, and don't forget to subscribe to the show and hit that auto download so you never miss an episode. Until the next time, keep your eyes open and your mind curious. This podcast has been compiled from information gathered in the public sphere, like news articles, documentaries, and open source material that can be found on the web. Everything in this podcast is alleged unless a conviction has taken place.